Welcome back to Wood & Shop. I'm Joshua Farnsworth. So there are a lot of tools that you will eventually need in traditional woodworking, hand tools, but I've created a basic list of the minimum required tools to get started in traditional woodworking, a basic set of tools. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about back saws, one of the most important things. I would recommend starting off buying 3 back saws. So what are back saws? So unlike the panel saws that I've talked about in a different video, like these that are used for rough dimensioning wood, back saws are finer saws that have a rigid back on them, like this brass back that that stiffens the blade and allows you to be able to have a nice thin blade for doing fine work on things like joinery, like these dovetails. These are saws that you'll use very often. So I recommend that somebody getting started look for 3 different back saws. If you can only afford one, I'll tell you in a minute which one to go for. But first is a dovetail saw. Dovetail saws are usually thin, and the teeth are cut in a rip configuration, which I mentioned before will allow you to cut down through the grain, such as when you're cutting dovetails like this. So you do that. It's quite useful, and I use that all the time, but it has some limitations, such as if you're cutting mortise and tenon joint like this, the tenon end may not be this small all the time. You may be doing a larger tenon, and so you'll need a larger rip saw like this, used for cutting down through the grain again. And the other saw that I recommend is a Carcass saw. So when I first got started in traditional woodworking, I was very confused about all the different names, because there's lots of different names for these different saws, but I'm going to try to create a standard for this. A Carcass saw was used traditionally in cutting carcasses, which is the frames of furniture, and they are cross-cut teeth. So as I mentioned in a previous video, it cuts across the grain. It's very useful. I use it all the time, such as when you're cutting down through the shoulders of tenons and a lot of other things. So I use these back saws all the time. If you're on a budget, then I suggest you first start off with just a dovetail saw and a Carcass saw, and then add a tenon saw once you get to a project where you need a larger saw and you're finding limitations. But if you absolutely just want to get one saw to start off with, I'd recommend the dovetail saw. And it can cut, you could use it to cut small things, like on the dovetails, cutting off these half pins right here. It's not very clean, and it won't look as nice as a crosscut saw, but if you absolutely need just one, can only afford just one saw, get one of these. So you can either find good vintage ones and spend some time bringing them up to your current standards, cleaning them up and sharpening them. But what I usually recommend is it's usually better to start off with a new saw that's freshly sharpened, that will give you a standard of what it feels like to really be using a properly sharpened and tuned saw. And so if you visit my buying guide on hand saws, you'll see a button or a link below this video to that guide. You'll know what to look for. I share some of my favorite brands and models, and also what to look for if you're buying vintage. And also I have resources for tuning up your hand saws. So I hope this has demystified something that confused me very greatly when I first got started. You'll learn a lot more about it in the buying guide, but this is just to give you a basic idea about these tools and what you need to get started. So thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, then subscribe up here on the blue button and visit Wood & Shop and learn for free how to get started in traditional woodworking.